If you'd like to introduce yourself and what you want to get out of this session, that would be great. And as we do the Q&A at the end, my question to you at the end, not now, is what are you hearing back home? Because we're loving to hear the reports back home about what you're hearing. So right now, introductions and what your name and where you're calling in from. No need to do a land acknowledgement. We'll keep this short if we can. And what you want to get out of this session, we can go alphabetically. Yeah, please go ahead. So starting with your first name alphabetically. So I'll do it. So I am Kathy Orlando. I'm calling in from Sharm el Sheikh. Actually, it is the traditional territories of the Bedouin people, I do believe. And lots of beautiful coral reefs here. So yeah, and what do I hope to get out of this session is I hope to be able to intel share with you and just get a sense of what's going on outside of this bubble that I'm in. So thank you. So please go alphabetically by your first name.
That might be me next, Jeffrey Levitt from Canada, and my hope is to find out what's going on in the bubble in Sharm el Sheikh that we may not be hearing about here in Canada.
Jennifer, I think you're next. Oh, we missed Francois, but we'll go Jennifer and then Francois. S'il vous plaît. Can you unmute yourself, Jennifer? And introduce yourself, where you're calling in from and what you hope to get out of today.
Yeah, I'm calling in from Perth in Western Australia, but I couldn't change my participant thing in the, for some reason. I don't know why. Anyway, but that's where I'm calling from. So it's 9 o'clock at night here, and I'm interested to know what is actually going on, because all you get are little clips of protests and not a lot else actually. Obviously we hear a lot about the Pacific Islanders because they have terrible problems with inundation from the sea, ruining their crops and destroying their marine life, and heaven knows what's going on there. So all kinds of problems for them. But we don't hear a lot else about what's going on around other parts of the world.
Oh,
and so I
I'm
think
glad.
the main emphasis is on developing countries, isn't it, on the impact on them in this
I will report back to our Pacific Island colleagues here that that's what you're hearing in Australia, and I'm sure they're going to be very happy to hear that that's what you're hearing in Australia. And I hope by the end of today's call you'll have a better appreciation of why that is so. Oh, we lost Francois, so we'll go to Patricia. Where are you calling in from, and what do you hope to get out of today's call?
Hi everybody, it's Patricia. I'm calling in from Toronto, Canada, and looking forward to just getting a deeper update of what's going on. I would agree with Jennifer. I have not dug deep into some of the other non-mainstream news outlets about the COP yet. I'm going to be doing that when it ends, but right now it's the Globe and Mail, and you're not getting deep information about it. So very curious about what's going on. Thanks so much for doing the call.
My pleasure. Okay, and I'm Monte.
So I guess it's my turn. My name is Sune. I'm calling you from Germany, and obviously I'm the the only one not having English as a mother tongue. Anyway, I'm also curious to know more details about what happens at the COP. We in Germany, we get news from other, like G20, from the war in Ukraine, etc. We hear very little from COP.
Yeah, and on day one, so the G20 is just for everybody's reference point. The G20 was yesterday, and it's pretty much ending right now. And the take-home message, I have not read the 20-page document. But there's going to be no backsliding on Glasgow. Okay, so that's the take-home message from a climate perspective. That's what we should take. And it was really sad that Putin decided to bomb Kyiv yesterday on the first day of the G20. So yeah, so thanks for sharing that, and I'm sure that's why it's in your news. But you know, as a perspective, the fact that it's not in your news is a good thing too, because then we get to do this in the freedom of not being like under a microscope and all that drama and politics that comes with it. So it's both good and bad, but at least you get a private report and then you can report out. So thank you. And Brian, where are you calling in from, and what do you hope to get out of today's call? Are you able to talk? And there's no pressure. Okay. It's all
Yes,
right.
I am. Actually, I'm calling from Nairobi, Nairobi, Kenya. I'm in the field right now, so my apologies about the noise. There's an installation we're doing. I run this water solutions company, and sort of unexpected. I'm in the field right now, and there's an installation we are currently doing. So my apologies for the noise. But I wanted to keep up with the discussion and the goings on at COOP, and see what we can get in terms of understanding where solutions lie and what we can contribute to the discussion and the solutions that exist. So yeah, that's it from us.
Well, welcome and thank you for joining us, Brian. And I'm so happy somebody from Africa is here. You're gonna love some of the pictures that I share. I think you'll see why I'm so happy to see you here on the call. And if anybody else after Sophie, if anybody else after Sophie enters, it's okay. I'm gonna go forward. But Sophie, if you want to introduce yourself and what you hope to get out of today's call, that would be great.
I came into this not knowing much about it, and I just like learning about what's happening at COP. I'm a scientist and I'm involved in renewable energy. So
Go ahead.
I'm in the UK, just so you know.
Wonderful. We have a wonderful group in the UK, Citizens Climate International group in the UK, as well as in Kenya, as well as in Germany, so, and Australia. So we're covered. We're totally covered here. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. And we have covered everything. So, sorry. Yeah, okay. So just as a reminder that Citizens Climate Lobby, that's our mothership for those of you who are not familiar with our organization. And our mission is pretty much the same. We exist to create the political will for a livable world by enabling individual breakthroughs in the exercise of personal and political power. We have just over 20,000 supporters outside the USA, organized in 189 countries. And they're organized in 76 countries. That means they're in pods. They're not like just floating around. They're actually being captured somehow. And we have 51 countries with active chapters and a total of 152 active chapters outside the United States of America. So usually when you come on these calls, I go into great lengths to like introduce you to how we train volunteers, and I go to great lengths to talk about carbon pricing. But because we are at COP today, another thing that we do is civic diplomacy. And for the record, we not only do the Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, we also do the G7 and the World Bank, a little bit of the G20, and once upon a time we did IPCC too. So, and next month we will be at the Global Biodiversity United Nations Conference of the Parties in Montreal as well. So today's focus is totally about civic diplomacy and really focused on COP. So as Jennifer was saying, like a lot of what we're hearing is about loss and damage. So, yeah, because that's really important. especially to the islands in the Pacific that are on the front lines. This is what we want at this COP. This is what every single one of us wants, because we cannot let those people lose their countries. It's that simple. And it's just morally wrong what's happening. So we're fighting with everything we have for loss and damage. And I'm going to give you something to think about at the end. So a really cool thing that I've noticed this time around, like usually at COPs, at the conference of the parties, like our starting point is human rights. Like everything, that's where we start. Human rights must be embedded into everything that we do. I am starting to see a lot of nature's rights at this COP. The idea that human rights are tied to nature's rights from a legal perspective. So that is this is the first time I'm really sensing it. So yes, human rights has always been here, but now we're seeing nature rights. And yes, we want to keep 1.5C alive. That means that aspiration, and there is some tension of some are mumbling that that's might be, you know, buried or even pulled out of some of these documents. So that's our focus. We're human rights, loss and damage, and keeping 1.5C alive. So Citizen Climate International, we take a huge view of this. Yes, we are focused on carbon pricing, but we see the whole ecosystem as well, like the entire, but even then we have to focus in on things. So we do spend, we have one team here that's working quite a bit on civics to bring local wisdom to policy and investment. And this is our, ESATs is really leading that charge through the Action for Climate Empowerment, because public education, public awareness is really important in a democracy. So she's leading that. And this is members of our team. Rita Raj, he's from India. Asisati, she's from Puerto Rico. This is Solemi, she is originally from Venezuela, but she's a naturalized American. This is a Minnesotan senator, Frank, and I'm gonna forget his last name. He's so friendly. I never learned his last name. And because we're all over the place in this huge village here, we barely get to see each other. And this is our African colleague, David Michael Turungwa, and they're at an ACE event there. So they do civics, and we do a lot of incentives to realign, restructure, and reward. So trying to move things around, and also to finance and invest in climate smart value building activities across the whole economy. So a lot of financial stuff, so not just carbon pricing, and people are going to need food. Okay, so, and the food systems are shifting. Food is a solution to climate change as well. So we want to make sure this is done in a proper way. And also nature, so we're looking a lot at nature. So there's so much more here, but that's what we look at, and we're kind of like bucketing that. But my main focus, because we all come to here with a focus, is financial flows and fossil fuels. So at this event right here, it happened yesterday, called Don't Gas Africa, because there's a risk of gas, natural or not natural, fossil gas being developed in Africa to make up for what's no longer being made by or being imported into the West from Russia. And it shouldn't happen. It doesn't need to happen. There's so much evidence that, you know, we can clearly help our friends in the global south leapfrog over fossil fuels with the right financial incentives. And I just wanted to highlight, this is Precious Kolomwa. She is from Zambia, and she's one of our volunteers, one of the very first African volunteers I ever trained, and she's been with us for almost 5 years. And this is Gloria, she's from Nigeria. She's also one of our superstars. I mean, both of these women hold many hats. in terms of like the climate work they do, and Citizens Climate International is one of them. And this is a new friend I made. It's Prince Israel, and I'm not able to pronounce his last name. And we were at an event outside yesterday here at COP27 asking for there being no gassing of Africa. And the campaign is called Don't Gas Africa. So what are our concerns here? 1.5C, we're concerned that we might lose that goal, that language, that aspiration, and we don't want to lose it. I know for some it may be a little bit artificial or not the best goal, but you know, you need a goal. You need a goal, and people fought so hard for this, and we have all this data. So there's a little bit of a worry, a current. I'm not totally worried based on other things I'm hearing, but there is a current here running through the COP that the 1.5C aspiration might not continue, but I'm not gonna, it is a concern. I don't think it's a big, like one to totally lose sleep over, but it is something we're keeping our eye on. Historically, the Conference of the Parties have been mitigation focused, which is a very global north thing to do. But we need to do adaptation and loss and damage at the same time. We can walk and chew gum. We can do all of the above. Not doing adaptation and loss and damage is unbalanced. And anything that is unbalanced is doomed to failure. And a huge concern here is the presence of fossil fuel companies. It's very maddening, including my own country, Canada. So I don't know if you saw the news yesterday, but a bunch of us were in the Canadian pavilion. I brought my African colleagues, I brought Indian colleagues, like East Indian colleagues, and there was Indigenous people from Canada, and a whole bunch of us from various climate action groups here in Canada as well in the Canadian pavilion when oil companies and the Minister of Environment for Alberta were giving a talk in the Canadian pavilion here at COP27. And we were all prepared to shoot up our hand to ask a question at the end of the session and pass the microphone over to 15-year-old Sophia Mathor so she could ask a question about how the mathematics of Alberta's expansion of oil doesn't seem to align with 1.5C planet and doing our fair share. But unfortunately, the moderator would not allow for any questions. Anticipating that, we did two things. We got this CBC National News in the room, and they videotaped it. And so it made the national news last night in Canada that this 15-year-old girl from Northern Ontario was not allowed to ask a question about fossil fuel expansion in Alberta, and she was going to do it very politely in the Canadian pavilion. In full disclosure, she is my daughter, but this team here super supported her, and it is a big concern running through this whole COP. So if you want that link to that story, it's on the CBC and I can give it to you. So yeah, and here's who was in the room. Sonia Savage, and that explains the oh yeah, when you're at a COP, you're not allowed to mention the name of any politician or any country or any delegate. And we just managed to slip in there, stop savage extraction. Sonia Savage is the Minister of Environment and Protected Areas in the government for the government of Alberta. So before I continue with like what you can do, I'm wondering if you have any questions or comments, or you just need to vent now that you've kind of been experiencing what I've been experiencing.
I have a question, if it's okay, Kathy.
Yeah, go ahead, Patricia.
Well, I see Pembina was on the panel yesterday, did they do any sort of counter action discussions against some of the, maybe the pro fossil fuel folks in Alberta?
No, the discussion was extremely focused on methane reductions within the sector, within the oil and gas sector. So there was no deviating from that topic, no. And so they, yeah, and then to top it off, yesterday CBC produced an article saying that the methane calculations on how much is being lost in Alberta are all off to begin with. Like, so as we're going in there, we're like, oh my gosh, more data. So no countering, nothing. It
Did he
was just
speak up
like,
at all? Did they speak up at all, Pimina?
no, it was extremely polite to the point of being totally greenwashing.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Kathy, I have a question. From Canada, this is obviously a huge embarrassment to us, but does this go on in other pavilions and in other, this type of thing in other pavilions and other sessions at COP, or is this a total outlier?
Yes, there are other pavilions with oil and gas companies in there, and the blah, 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 as Greta would say. Yep, it's all part of it.
Boy.
Yeah, but there's good things happening too. I don't want to leave you on a note that, you know, yeah, there's a lot of good happening. So like those, I'll just wait a moment, see if there's any other questions, because I will use my next part to explain that. Any other questions before I get on to solutions and what you can do at home, and then we can have a little chat. So can I move on? All right. So one of the things that we're doing here is creating a story, a framework that we're trying to grab the narrative away from the fossil fuel companies, okay? And one of the narratives of many is there is money. There totally is money. We just need rules. We just need rules. Okay, so we have a campaign going right now. It's called G20 Leaders Follow the Money. And I'm just gonna stop sharing for a moment if I can. And share again. Let me see. Oh, I see what I have to do. Hold on. Just be a moment. There we go. There we go. Can you see this screen here that says send a digital letter to the G20 leaders and ask them to follow the money? You can all see that?
Yes.
Okay. So the story here is there is money. What the governments of the world have to do is create frameworks and policies to redirect that money. Okay. So we give them 4 ideas, but I could give you another 5 or 6 if you had time. So here is the narrative that we're working with. Just gotta move things around here. So the G20 is responsible for 80% of all total carbon emissions, and Africa as a continent is responsible for around 3%, depending on where you get your data from. So between 1 and 5%, depending on how you count the numbers. And the G20 leaders, their rallying cry this year was recover together, recover strong. And that was before the war in Ukraine broke out. Okay, they set their agenda, and then, but we can and must simultaneously tackle the COVID recovery and the climate emergency. I know many of us in the global north always think we have to cut GHGs, but we have to do all 3. We must finance loss and damage. We must finance successful adaptation, and we must cut GHGs by 45% in the next 86 months. Many countries are trying hard to get the loss and damage here at COP. The United States is obstructing. But there is money, and we can finance successful adaptation. And this all has to be done by January 2030. And just as a reminder, the more fossil fuels burned, the more loss and damage and adaptation costs for all of us. So what the governments of the world need to do is redirect financial flows and create a resilient and equitable future. And they just need to create policies. That's what they're hired to do. They're lawmakers, they're legislators. They make laws that are supposed to protect us. That's their job. And they can totally do this. But we need to educate them and we need to help them. So we give them 4 ideas. So here's one. Impose a windfall tax on big oil. And Prime Minister Mia Mottley of the Barbados said 10%, right off the top. In the first day of the COP here, she said take 10%. And this would go a long way to funding the things that we need. As well, I know we talk a lot about fossil fuel subsidies, but there are $1.8 trillion of subsidies in agriculture, fisheries, forestry that are destroying our planet. And we need to take those subsidies and redirect them in ways that are more nature positive and people positive. We could do that. There's some money there. I don't know if you know this, but the country of New Zealand also, and I can't print, that's that name there, which I still can't pronounce properly, Eritrea. You want to help me here, Jennifer? Do you know how to say the indigenous name for New Zealand?
Well, it's Etero, but I don't think I pronounced it properly either. I'm not a
Etero. Okay, great. So Eritrea, be like Eritrea, and disclose climate risk. So Eritrea is leading the world, New Zealand is leading the world in creating frameworks for their financial institutions to have to disclose their climate risks. So this will start helping investors make the right investment and start showing to the world who are we're going to destroy the planet. And and we must price carbon pollution. We must make polluters pay, and we can do that and reduce income inequality at the same time. You can be like Canada and be like Austria, the country of Austria in Europe. And you can price pollution, carbon pollution, and give the money back to the people as an equal dividend, and let that rising price on carbon pollution predictably be the market signal that starts to transform our system and give the money back to the people, because most of us actually will come out ahead. So we have a little bit of a buffer as we transition our economy. So there's this letter here that you can sign and share. But remember, everything must be rooted in human rights and gender justice. And then if you click through here, I just put a whole bunch of reports here. And I also support the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is kind of mentioned in this letter as well. If you're unfamiliar with it, it's really gained traction here at COP. Like, they're getting BBC coverage, they're getting Guardian coverage, they're getting Mondial, which is the big French newspaper coverage. So it's really starting to like uplift here at COP. And they had a strategy session on Sunday, and it's like crazy to get around here at Sharm el Sheikh. And I was kind of bummed out. I was like, oh, I gotta give up my Sunday morning to go to a strategy session. It was literally an 8-minute walk down the beach from my hotel, the strategy session. It could have been like a 2-hour bus ride. It was literally an 8-minute walk down the beach to go to this Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty session. They're gaining major traction here. So proud of the work they're doing. So anyways, it's in there as well. So, and yeah, but greenhouse gases are going up, and there's no, we're just not on track. We're not on track. We feel like we're kind of losing a little bit here, but we all know that once we get the policies in play, there's going to be like a transformation. They're still financing fossil fuels. this is totally possible to transform. And we all know, like, there's so many reports now that if you develop any new fossil fuel assets, you're at risk for stranded assets. I mean, the World Energy Outlook from the IEA, like, what more do you need to not invest in fossil fuels? And also the Lancet Countdown is just doing a brilliant job, you know, telling us how much health and climate change are linked together. So what we need you is to give we have everything we need to transform our economy. All we need now is courage. Courage, that's it. And we have the numbers, we have the ideas. And perhaps one more thing I would like to share is Catherine McKenna, the Honorable Catherine McKenna, Canada's former climate change minister and then former industry minister, is now a high-level assembly director of financial institution, financials for I never get the acronyms right, but I'm just going to say for businesses and non-national governments. And they say it laid out a framework for financial companies and province and subnational governments and cities for what they need to do to be recognized as a high-level net zero ambassador or whatever. And the details are awesome. And I'm looking forward to sharing those a lot in 2022. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm hoping that you will all take time to share and sign and share this letter. And now we can have a discussion of, like, what did I give you what you wanted, or do you have other questions? Anyone?
Yeah, I have a question, Kathy. Again, this is Brian from Kenya. I realized that I didn't introduce whatever I do. I run this organization called Swal Water Solutions, and we are in the water space. We are active in trying to provide household water filtration solutions and pumping solutions for solar. And we've been active in trying to initiate programs across East Africa for mainly aimed at improving the lives of the youth and the women, and also trying to preserve and conserve the environment. And in terms of the environment, we provide this household water filtration solution, which in turn goes to save up to 2 tons of carbon from being emitted into the atmosphere every year from its usage. So we've actually initiated carbon credits projects across in Tanzania. And I saw something about carbon pricing on one of your slides, and I was curious to know about this is related to the pricing of carbon credits. Is it related? And if so, as part of the loss and damage lobby initiative, would it make sense to maybe lobby for higher prices for carbon credits coming from Africa? Because we are the ones who are most affected, yet we contribute the least to the emissions. So would lobbying for higher prices for carbon credits being extracted from Africa be something that makes sense to you or to your organization?
Okay, that's a great question. Cap and trade with offsets is, part of carbon pricing. And would it make sense to ask for higher carbon pricing? Yes, that would, yes, but the offset thing is very complex. The first thing every person, every company, everybody must do is cut emissions. We don't have enough land area to think everything. So the top priority should be to cut emissions. But there is a place for offsets. It just has to be carefully monitored, and the data is for tracking is getting better and better, and in terms of how much emissions. And then there's And then there's data for tracking where the money goes. That's also starting to get much better. So your question is, should you be lobbying for higher carbon pricing? Yes, I mean, the higher the carbon price, the stronger the signal to change this economy. But I think if I was to read the tea leaves correctly here, and from what I know, I think that many African nations should be going strong for loss and damage and going strong for adaptation financing. And one thing I've left out here is to go after the multilateral development banks to give concessional financing for those sorts of projects. There is a small role for offsets, but it's got to be in a microcosm of many other things happening at once. So the answer is yes, but it's complex. And I do feel that there should be one of the things that needs to be done and is starting to happen at the World Bank and the IMF is reform. There are reforms happening. That's what we're hearing here. So I'm going to step back a little bit. So is everybody here familiar with the IMF and the World Bank? You heard of it before. Okay, so they were formed at the end of World War II to help with reparations and rebuild Europe and Japan after World War II so that they wouldn't sink into fascism like Germany did after World War I. So, is to make sure that their economies can move forward in a healthy way. That happened in the late 1940s at a place called Bretton Woods. And pretty much the structures that are there right now, I'm gonna nicely say they are colonial in their structures, okay? Because all these structures have not really changed a lot over the last 70 or so years. And 70 years ago, many of the countries that are at grave risk for climate change were under colonial rule. Much of Africa, much of the Caribbean, and these rules were made for white people to get rich. Like, let's not kid ourselves, okay? That's, and so here, an incredible statistic was given by Al Gore and Mia Motley in the leader speeches. All right, so talking about financing global north versus global south. We need $4 to $6 trillion a year to finance the transition to 1.5C. That's not going to come from the taxpayers. We don't have that money. Much of that has to come from the private sector because the taxpayers are supposed to be funding the health and the education and stuff like that. If we're also funding the transition, we're going to leave people behind. So we need financial signals. This was the most shocking statistic. It was like an epiphany for me. So Al Gore, former vice president of the United States, and Mia Motley were practically team tagging each other in their leader speeches. In North America, in Canada and the United States, when we go to borrow money, 90% of our clean energy is being funded, is being built by the privite sector. So the taxpayer is not on the hook for 90% of the clean energy that is being built. In the global south, it is 15%. 85% of their clean energy that is being built by their government. So that's taking much needed resources away from health, from children, from women, from all these really important things. So why is that? Why is it that the global north were able to let the private sector finance much of this transition, whereas in the global, much of the global south, it's the opposite? The public's financing it. It's because in the global north, when our countries go to take a loan, they pay 1/7 the interest rate of the global south. We pay 2%, they on average pay 14% to build to build the infrastructure and everything. So like, there's this colonial, system is set right from the get-go to not even let them transform. So Brian, yes, we need to do offsets. That is one of the things we need to do, but we also need to reform the World Bank. We also need to just give money, just give loss and damage money, just give, proper financing. So all of the above. And yes, push for a stronger carbon price. I wish I could give you a simple answer, but it's not simple. We've got to push in every direction and just get this livable planet happening. And was that an okay answer? Do you have any questions or comments, Brian?
Yeah, that's clear. That's clear. Thank you for your answer.
Yeah, I'll be posting this on our YouTube channel at Citizens Climate International in the next couple of days. There's really crappy internet here, so be patient. I might not be able to do it till I get back to Canada. So but yeah, maybe look next week and you can review what I just said. Or we can talk some more if you ever want to. Okay, any other questions?
Kathy, I was wondering about what's, you talked a lot about loss and damage, and all that we've heard here is that it seems to be a slow slog, and that the two options that are on the table are either kick the whole thing out 2 years to start it, or kind of even worse, study it for 2 years and then come back and see where they are. Nothing really immediate. And I was wondering if that's the sense in the hall as well of the progress.
Yeah. Yep. Americans are stalling and the Pacific Islands are threatening to walk out. When I was at COP26 last year, I almost wanted to cry listening to the Pacific nations intervene on loss and damage. They're like, and then when they were trying to do the closing in Glasgow, they're like, really? This is all you're gonna give us? Really? We're freaking dying here, man. I mean, I was shown pictures yesterday that will haunt me forever. People showing me things on their phones, like, yeah, and it's the US of A. It's freaking holding us back. Because, they're so litigious. I don't know, what's the word, Jeffrey? You're the lawyer here.
Litigious.
They're so like afraid of lawsuits. They see loss and damage as like a potential to be sued, and giving it like as an acceptance of culpability, and it's really frustrating, the lack of cooperation and the lives that are literally being like sacrificed for the sake of the almighty dollar here. But we're not going to give up. We're not. This is coming. We're fighting with everything we have.
I'm interested in this fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty idea. How far is that progressing?
Okay, so just to back up, it started in October of 2020. It was introduced. There was no COP that year because we were deep in the COVID crisis. So a bunch of people stuck at home came up with this idea for the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. And it made kind of a debut then, that it was very soft because we're not really meeting. And then it started, and then so what it is, okay, I live in a country that has fossil fuels, all right? I live in a petro state, let's face it, and we're being totally controlled by Alberta here, okay? Like they're totally running the show, like in Canada. They're just making everything impossible. We cannot move forward. Like if you look at we need, but there's a little part of me that like recognizes that we need like look what happened with COVID. Canada does not make our own vaccines. All right, we lost that in the 1980s. All right, so we were at the mercy of the United States during COVID. So we had to scramble to figure out how to get vaccines here in Canada because we had no vaccine production. So being at the mercy of such a nation that puts itself first, I can see why like there's such tension to like be very careful as we unwind ourselves from fossil fuels. So this is the beauty of the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. It's like the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. Everybody agrees to a set of rules. And then but the rules aren't figured out yet, but you know, it'll take 2 to 3 years once enough nations decide they're gonna do it. But they're gonna, and it'll be under 3 things like with the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. No new fossil fuels. Unwind what we have and leave no one behind. So where is it at? The WHO endorsed it. The European Union endorsed it. Tuvalu has endorsed it. The Vanuatu has endorsed it. Timor-Leste has endorsed it. I don't think any other country has endorsed it yet here at COP. It does not have a business arm to it yet, but it has Nobel Prize winners, parliamentarians, and cities and religious groups. So if you, and then NGOs, the civil society here. And if you were to take all of those people that are covered under all of those entities that are signed on to the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, it now covers 1.2 billion people on this planet. So, and one of the 2 things you can do back home is to look at the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty website and see if your city or area has signed on to it, has endorsed it. Secondly, see if you can find some federal, they don't take subnational governments, they only take national government parliamentarians to sign on to it. So we can keep building those networks and that institutional wisdom. So I think it's brilliant. See, the carbon pricing and the finance, like works on supply, it works on demand, right? Like it works on the consumer end of things, but we need a supply end of things component. And I think the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty is brilliant. They balance each other so beautifully. Was that helpful? Cool. All right. Anyone else? I want you to know I'm still hopeful, even though I almost cried. I'm really hopeful because I know once we get these tracks laid down, things are really going to start to change. And there's a lot of people here doing really good work. And we're trying to steal that narrative away from the fossil fuel company. Don't worry, we're working on it. Thank you, Monica. That is, okay. Do you have, Monica, if you just email me next week, and probably late next week, that would be great. And we can talk, okay? I'd love to talk more. Yeah, okay. If you let me go early, that would be really cool. Are you letting me go early or do I have to go right to the top of the hour?
Could you share your email? Is it okay if you share your email?
Yes, please do, but bear with me as, just a few more really cool stories. I've like lobbied 5 politicians from Canada so far since I've been here. Like I just speak out in session and they come up to me and start lobbying me. So it's been great. Because like educating our politicians is a big component of what we do, and they just pick my brain and pick the brains of our volunteers. Sorry if I'm using an English metaphor that you don't understand. They engage with us to learn about our educational talking points. Okay, this is great. And yeah, okay, is that it? Setu, are we done? Stephanie? Oh my God, I can feel your love.
Thanks, Kathy, for taking time, and you must be really busy there, taking time to update us. So really appreciate it.
Oh, I had to touch base. I wanted to give you a sense of what it is, and I know that the 11 people here will take something out of this and just spread the love and spread the courage. We're gonna do this.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. Thanks, Barbara. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Kathy.
Oh, my pleasure. Bye.